So if you've been stacking for long enough, buying physical silver, gold, whatever it is, whenever the price of the underlying commodity gets to a certain point, normally by a percentage or two, there's an influx of people that are always clamoring for a deal. That can they get a spot deal? Can they get something of that sort? Okay, why hasn't retail prices adjusted? What's with all the premiums, things like that? And this isn't a bad thing per se. It's natural to always want the best price and to take advantage of the situation. The problem is it overlooks a lot of the key factors into how retail marketing works. So to provide a bit of understanding on this topic, I decided to create a video that explains more of these concepts in kind of a simple way. And simple is subjective, but it's something that I think that's a little bit better than what a lot of the understanding levels are right now. By way of a disclaimer, this is not a simple topic, not even remotely. There are whole areas of this discipline, this discussion, that focuses on concentrations of finance, and more than just a few PhDs have been written on this subject of pricing dynamics in retail markets. So this is a huge, difficult topic to understand, but I can at least provide a little bit of an overview. In the few minutes that we have, are you going to become a master of this subject? No, of course not. You'll have a basic understanding, a grounding of it. You'll at least be able to walk into a store and realize that, okay, well, if spot all of a sudden decide drop 2%, why you're not seeing that at the retail register. It'll help you be a more informed buyer. You can start to search for deals a little bit better. You can start to look for things that make a little bit more sense to you. So let's start this out and let's set it up that we're a jewelry store, and through demand from our customers that we've realized that we want to get into selling bullion. So we talked to our suppliers and we realized that their pricing could get bullion to us at a price of spot plus $3.50. That means that the total price the store pays for bullion is going to be $3.50 over the current spot price at order. The store figures that they can actually make a profit if they charge $2 on top of that. So that's going to bring the total price out the door of an ounce of silver bullion to spot plus $5.50. Not too bad. That's in line with a lot of accepted standards. To begin, let's set the ground rules that I used to create the model that we're going to be using for the rest of this video. The model runs for 13 periods. Each period is 10 days in length. The business is only conducted on a single day, so we're not using some rotating week or anything like that. It's just one day that they're selling bullion, and that's it. It makes it much easier for us to explain this. And number 3, sales occur before inventory is filled or replenished. It just means that that's the order of operations. So we're not having to divide sales and deal with inventory at the same time. And this allows us to kind of set the cycle correctly. With those dynamics out of the way, let's dive into some of the specifics. So what would a video of mine be if I didn't have charts included? That's the question for the ages now, isn't it? In our first chart, we're going to look at the spot price over the 13 periods that we're dealing with. We can see the natural ebb and flow of the price that moves from a high of $27.82 up here down to a low of $25.06. Now this price was determined by using 5-minute data on a silver spot price and aggregating it to create a daily average. This is close enough to accurate for the model we're using. Next, on top of that, we can overlay the unit cost. So we can see the prices are even across the board at a distance of $3.50 over the spot price. Finally, we can visualize the retail price of each unit. This gives us a potential low of $30.56 to a high of $33.32. As a note, these prices are roughly in line with the average price distribution of generic bullion, so this is somewhat reflective of reality. In the next chart, we can see the way that orders are placed. Beginning in week 1, we place an order for 500 ounces. This covers our starting inventory. Based on the rules of engagement, there are no sales this week because orders are fulfilled after sales occur. Therefore, we can consider this to be inventory for week 2. The rest of the inventory orders follow that trend. They are recorded in the week in which they are placed and priced using that data, but are not able to be sold until the following week after they have been delivered. So in looking at the chart, we can see the flow of inventory into the store. Next, we can apply the sales for each week. We can see there is also a cycle that occurs, with some weeks moving more than others. Early on, the store is light on total inventory, so we need to order heavier to build a base of saleable units. However, as time goes on, we taper that back to prevent a glut of bullion lying around and tying up cash. This cycle is shown on the total inventory cumulative view. Total inventory is defined as the total inventory left each week after sales and receipt of new inventory. This peaks out at 2,175 ounces. Our goal is to always have at least 1,000 ounces on hand. We then apply the remainder inventory. There's a total based on current inventory minus sales. Think of this as before we make our order for the week. Finally, we can apply the cumulative new inventory and cumulative units sold to see the entire activity over the period. This shows that in total, we ordered 4,800 ounces and sold 3,600, leaving us with an ending inventory of 1,200. Let's look at some ideal revenue numbers. These numbers are ideal in the sense that they assume inventory is sold immediately upon receipt at a total volume. So, if we order 500 ounces, those 500 ounces will be sold at the same price point levels at which they were purchased and never carried over. It's a perfect demand curve where supply and demand are in perfect equilibrium and prices are static until sale. Hence why it's not a real-world view, but still important to see the perfect potential. Inventory cost shows us what the direct cost of each order is. Here we can see at various points where the pricing changes according to the current value of spot. When we apply the total revenue potential on top, the $2 margin is clearly evident. That is a thin margin and not out of line with what most bullion dealers exist within. This is about a 6% margin. By comparison, the local grocery store has on average 25% margin over wholesale, with a 2% gross profit. That leaves 23% of the wholesale retail spread allocated to overhead and other operational costs. That's almost 4 times more than the average bullion dealer. Needless to say, even under a perfect theoretical model, this is not a major windfall business, but the relative merits of that decision is not why we're here. So let's apply 2 different lines now. Let's first look at revenue numbers based on the sales made. This is also a perfect model where all inventory is consumed under a single price level and cost basis. Put another way, each week's sale is priced as if they came from a single lot of inventory, all purchased at the prior period's price, in accordance with our rules of engagement. It doesn't take much to notice the difference. Our sales up front were significantly less than the price we paid for the units. We lost money. However, from 5/12 until 6/17, we made a lot more than our inventory cost us, except for the most expensive orders on 3/2 and 3/14. This gave us a gross profit as shown. All told, it results in a total profit of $7,200 for the period. Unfortunately, it took us spending $108,063 to make that $7,200. Woof. The problem is that we are treating all units as equal and disregarding sunk costs and sane pricing practice. This is what would happen if a retailer simply adjusted pricing according to momentary drops in spot. It looks solely at retail levels with no consideration for sunk costs or inventory investment. It's great for the customer, but unsustainable for a real retailer that expects to stay in business. So by now, your head is probably swimming. I can appreciate that quite a bit. As I warned, this is not a simple topic, and a lot of the theory in this does involve complex mechanics that go on. As if things weren't complex enough, we need to define a new system. Luckily, this is actually pretty easy to comprehend. Imagine you have all 13 orders placed in 13 individual boxes. The boxes are laid out so the first box is in front, while the 13th box is last. Now, when a sale is made, it is pulled from the front box until that box is empty. Then the remaining items are pulled from the next box, and so on. This is an inventory system called first in, first out, or FIFO for short. Each box has its own attributes associated with it. The price paid, its retail price that is needed, etc. This allows for a rolling inventory and helps us keep track of things. In chart 4, I've identified that. In chart 2, we showed the inventory and how it was ordered. Now, let's break that up according to sales. Up first is the units sold. By now, this is pretty self-explanatory. Let's apply the sales for lot 1. The first order occurred in our first period was 500 ounces. In period 2, we sold 375 ounces. That left 125 ounces, which is held over until those are sold. In period 3, we sold 200 ounces. We need to first fill the order using that original order from period 1, which fills the 125 ounces. We then pull ounces from the next box to provide the remaining 75 ounces. Since period 2's order was for 750 ounces, we are left with 675 ounces to use before moving on to the next box. We can see lot number 2 filling orders until 4:30, or 5 periods before we need to dig into lot number 3. This continues on until all orders are filled. In this case, although we operated this model for 13 periods, only 7 lots were necessary. The remaining stock is reserved inventory and will be presumably used in the future. Chart 5 is the revenue numbers based on this method. Costs are allocated based on the period in which the items were purchased, and sales allocated based on the period in which the sale was made. The gross profit is the margin from this method. This method provides a total profit at the end of $8,911. That's $1,700 more than the direct pricing model. But let's dig just a little bit deeper. Chart 6 goes back to the ideal profit on inventory as a reference. If we apply the direct profit number, we see the same shape that we hopefully recognize by this point as being sales per period. This just applies that $2 per ounce level to each sale. If we look at allocated profit, we can see the effects of our inventory management. In the beginning periods, we are at a loss. If you remember back, you note the loss is also on a declining spot cycle. Therefore, our inventory was purchased at a price higher than the prevailing model allowed. So we were definitely having some issues. And for reference, I will go back. However, on 4/19, the price had reversed to a measurable degree. We now realized a profit quite in excess of the expected levels of the direct model. This is highlighted when I bring up just the difference between the two, but the results are much more evident in the cumulative totals. The cumulative direct profit is very much a straight line. The cumulative allocated is much more curved with a steeper grade. If we finally look at the cumulative ideal profit, there's a problem. Our allocated model didn't even perform that well against the ideal, but this is misleading. Remember back to chart 4, the allocated sales chart. In that, we established that the entirety of sales for the period were actually satisfied by only 6.5 periods worth of inventory. Let's call it 7 periods for simplicity though. So if we go back to the profit comparison, we need to look at the number from period 7 to get an accurate comparison on ideal profit to allocated profit. In period 7 on 4/30, the ideal profit was $7,700. The allocated inventory method provided $1,211 over the ideal, and we can say the balance of the ideal profits are potential future profits since the inventory hasn't actually been sold yet. That's simple, right? Pause for laughter. It's okay. It's not, and this stuff is highly confusing. Even within the simple model, there are a lot of questions and issues raised, none of which I addressed here. But let's go through some. Primarily, I've dealt with cost allocation. What about retail price allocation? An extension of this model would definitely be to have mixed sales. Like if we go to period 3 on chart 4, we can see that the day's sales came from 2 lots, 1 and 2. In a perfect world, the retail price of an ounce at that time of lot 1 purchase was $32.72, while the retail price of lot 2 would be $32.05. In a mixed lot scenario, the first 125 ounces would be sold at $32.72, while the remaining items will be sold at $32.05, or just maintained for all at the higher prevailing price. In that way, prices will be slow to decline, but overridden by a higher prevailing current price if the market was in upward swing, such as seen from FAR 7 onward. The downside of that scenario is one of competitive pressure. If other retailers are offering a better price closer to the baseline, then there is a demand problem, so it has to be balanced carefully. So what other solutions are there? As we saw, there are definite floors in price that a retailer has to maintain or they will be underwater quickly. This is why I started at 0 in this model. There was no legacy inventory that was purchased at a much lower price to act as a dollar cost average for total inventory. An older, more established retailer has that luxury, assuming they maintain adequate stores of inventory and prices don't adjust radically over a long cycle. Short dips in price can be weathered. long declines could be fatal. In a major short dip cycle, we could see things like what occurred back in the spring of 2020. The retail might take orders for future delivery, or they might just pull inventory for sale altogether. Either case allows for time to purchase inventory at significantly lower prices that can then be offered at retail expectations. Of course, there is the sunk investment in existing inventory, so the prices might not be completely in line with consumer expectations. But when haven't stackers griped about premiums? So given that, what else could be done to improve this model? Without digging too far into the weeds of finance, we could set up a model where the lowest cost unit was allocated to fill the current sale. The problem with this method is its limitations being all units are equal. If we are ordering exclusively, say, Sunshine rounds or Silvertown bars that are identical each time, that could work. However, this is also a limitation of the current model as well. In general, this type of allocation would effectively change things up. On a declining market, we would shift to a first in, likely, last out, or FILO method. On an ascending market, we would have a FIFO method, and on a leveled market, we would likely have a mix of FIFO or last in, first out, or LIFO. In practice, it's pretty obvious. If you just think about the inventory and which ones to use at any given moment, it's pretty logical and simple. But back-end tracking at volume can be brutal. Not to mention, the CPAs doing books and taxes will spit on the ground when they speak your name. This has been a lot to cover in a short period. I really hope that the age-old question of why I can't go into my LCS and buy an ounce near current spot has been answered. That's my only hope for this. While none of this makes paying retail on precious metals easier, I hope it does give a little bit of insight into why it's just not a good business practice and why any shop that's going to be around for any length of time is actually going to price based off of the current spot and everything else. There is a logic behind this item pricing, and it's not necessarily to gouge the customer or, maintain high premiums or anything of that nature. Smart businesses that manage their inventory effectively can definitely maximize their profits well beyond $1 or $2 per ounce. But it takes an understanding of the trade-offs and having the right models in place to adequately track this inventory correctly. So with that, I'll just say until next time, happy stacking.